In the last episode of Ask Dr. Gill, I discussed the three principles: psychology, mind, thought, and consciousness. And I gave you a taste of what that's about. Today on Ask Dr. Gill, I want to talk a little more about how we deal with our thoughts. And specifically, how do we deal with negative thoughts and move beyond them so that we can function from a different place. So stay tuned. Ask Dr. Gill. I'm Dr. Gail Winkleman, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the nature of thought. And before I jump into that, I want to just sort of bring up why this is important in terms of medicine and kind of how I practice. Because when we think of thought, we think of it in terms of what are the ideas, tasks, obsessions, whatever it is going through your mind. But I think that there is more to it than just, when I say more to it, I mean more to thought than just what is between our ears and what goes on in our brain. Because I actually do believe that our body is in effect a thought form, and therefore thoughts come up through the body in a way. And as an example, if you've ever had an interaction with somebody who's annoyed you greatly, and then you start having, say, a pain in your neck because they're being a pain in your neck, and it becomes literal, that's the response. That's sort of the piece that happens for people as a function of how the mind and the body sort of meld, and there's really no mind-body connection because they're really the same thing. And so this is the piece that I think becomes problematic in modern medicine, because we don't think of those two things as one, we think of them as separate. And therefore, if you're having an issue that no one can figure out, they send you to a psychologist. And, maybe the psychologist can help, maybe they can't, but they're still only looking at it from the mental aspect of things. And so the question then is how do you deal with this? And last night I was at a meditation gathering, for lack of a better way of speaking about it, and there was a reading from a Thich Nhat Hanh book. If you don't know who Thich Nhat Hanh was, he's since passed away, I think last year or the year before, I can't remember now. But he was a Buddhist monk who protested against the Vietnam War. He was actually, I believe he was from Vietnam originally, but lived in France for a long time. Very prolific writer, wonderful teacher, Buddhist teacher. And kind of the summation of what I want to talk about today is and I'm going to paraphrase the quote, just so you know. It was something to the effect of, when we want a particular thought, say we want to have the experience of being with our Buddha nature, we grasp for that. We try and grab that. And in the grasping, we push it away. And likewise, when we have a experience or a thought that we don't like, we push it away. And in that act, we actually hold on to it and bring it to us. And so within this idea is this concept of both the avoidance and the grasping. And this plays out oftentimes when we're having situations either that we want to continue or that we want to let go of. And either of those events becomes a deterrent from getting the experience that it is that you're trying to gather for yourself. So the question is how do you let go of these thoughts if grasping them is going to only have you continue holding on to them? It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? It's like the aspect of the grasping keeps you grasping, right? And the desire keeps you grasping. So the answer lies in allowing. And I should let you know right off the bat that there are times when I struggle with this. And it becomes this persistent thing that happens, right? So this is where meditation or mindfulness can be very powerful for people because it allows us to focus on something that isn't the thing that we are avoiding or desiring. And in the practice, in the mindfulness practice, that tradition that I have worked in, it is focusing on the breath. You focus on the experience of breathing the air in and letting the air out. And how that happens, how you breathe in this tradition is less important than just watching it. And you might watch and you might notice that you have an experience of pain while you're sitting, and you notice that. Or you might notice a sound going by in a car. I remember I was at a meditation one time. It was guided, and there was an ambulance that went by, and the leader said, if you happen to hear this, if you hear this siren going by, just let it come in and let it go. And I hadn't even heard the siren until he said something about the siren. I was so engrossed in whatever it was that was happening in that moment that I didn't hear the siren. And some people, I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen in your life when you're doing something and it doesn't register. I mean, think about if you have kids who play video games and you ask them to take out the trash, generally it doesn't register because they're so enthralled and engrossed with the video game or their book or whatever it is. And so that's the piece that's sort of interesting to me is you watch that and you know that you can let go of certain things because you do it all the time. We all can do this. There's just certain things that we are more likely to or less likely to become fixated on for whatever reason. And so watching the breath and coming back to that is just a focal point for us to then be able to let go of whatever it is that's happening, whether we're grasping for something or we're trying to avoid something. And if you can do that, then what happens is the thoughts become this experience that is as if you're watching clouds float across the sky. And that is a very, very freeing place to be. Getting there takes practice. And this is where the mindfulness practice and meditation practices in Hinduism and Buddhism, for example, come from, is to be able to not stop your thoughts per se, but be able to recognize them as thoughts and let them go as thoughts without having to think about them and persist on the particular thoughts. It's like having memories of a dream in the morning and then just letting it go. Now, some people write down their dreams and want to remember them and get them on paper so that they can analyze them later. And that's basically what most people do on a daily basis with their experience of day-to-day thoughts. And so many of our thoughts are just random ideas and thoughts that come into our head and have nothing to do with anything other than the randomness of our experience. And it's interesting that we take these so seriously sometimes. And as you begin to sort of see this, you realize, oh, I don't really need to pay attention to this because it's nothing to do with anything other than these random things. Now, one thing that I will say is that as you sit with a mindfulness practice, at the beginning, this may get worse. And part of that is just awareness, and some of it is the brain trying to not get changed in whatever way it is. And I'll explain that more. I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll talk more about this on the other half. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Ask Dr. Gill. I'm Dr. Gill Winkelman, your host, and we're talking about the nature of thought and mindfulness in this podcast, and we're going to do a little meditation at the end, a short one, but I'm going to do it at the end. And what you'll want to do if you're driving or you're walking or doing something like that is when we get to there, pause the podcast and find a safe place to do this where you're not going to be disturbed. And it's not a very long activity, just so you know. It's meant to kind of give you a taste of the experience before you dive into bigger tastes. And if you've never done it, this will be a new experience for you. And if you have done it, this will be just a reminder. And before we get there, I just want to say if you have questions, comments, please feel free to email me at info@askdrgill.com, askdrgil.com. And if you like the show, please leave a review that you do, because that helps get viewers or listeners, and that's really helpful, and I would very much appreciate it. So we're talking about mindfulness, and before the break, I was talking about how as we begin to do this, our brains sort of come back to pushing at us, if you will. And it's kind of like a toddler trying to get your attention. And if you've had kids or you've spent any time with them, and you're looking at something or reading something and they are trying to engage with you, they can be very persistent. And our brains are kind of like that. Or if you have a dog who wants to go out for a walk, they can do the same thing as well. And it's a very intriguing thing to me to see when that happens. And generally, that is a good sign that you are being in this place where you are beginning to quiet your mind down. Now, I don't know for sure the scientific reason for this, but one of the theories that I am working on and looking at is that our brains are designed to alert us to danger. And that is a very obscure way of thinking about this, because the brain will signal danger even when there's nothing wrong out there. It's just different, because that's where brains are, their function is around. And I'll give you an example, which I think I've talked about in another podcast. But if you're driving along, and many people will drive in a habit form, and the habit means that they're not necessarily paying attention to what's going on. Now, if there's a big truck that seems to be swerving into your lane in front of you, you snap out of that, right? That's the danger that your brain is recognizing, and then it becomes alert, and there's a fear response. And that fear response is meant to show you that there is something that is not familiar. But that unfamiliarity warning will come up sometimes, even as we are doing something new. And this is actually an important piece to recognize if you're trying to use, for example, manifestation, or start a new business, or a relationship, or whatever it is, because your brain is set in a particular pattern. And as we get older, it becomes more and more set. And so when we begin any kind of practice, and with mindfulness, or just even paying attention to your thoughts, let's not even put a label on it, you're just paying attention to your thoughts, that becomes a different experience, and the brain signals it as dangerous. And so as you're doing this, just remind yourself of that, so that you can say to your brain, this is okay. I don't need to pay attention to that. I can let that go. And see what happens. So if you're driving or walking or something, this is a good time to pause it. And if you're not, find a comfortable seat. Ideally, you're sitting up straight with your back up, because your back straight, because that way you won't fall asleep. And this is going to be short, so it's unlikely you'll fall asleep. But so just notice. Just be and notice yourself sitting in the chair, and notice your body in the chair or the couch or however you're sitting. And just notice what's around you, and go ahead and close your eyes and just feel the experience of being still for a minute. What's that like? Do thoughts start coming into your head right away? If they do, just let them go. And notice how you're feeling. Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling awake? Are you feeling agitated? Just notice it without any judgment. Just be aware of it and let it go. And feel your feet where they are, if they're touching the ground, or if you are sitting cross-legged, how that feels. Notice what that experience is like. And as you do that, begin to take a breath starting from your belly. So you're going to breathe in and extend your belly out, and you're going to breathe out and push your belly in. And that will move the air through your lungs. And just notice what that's like for you. And as you do that, notice any thoughts that come by, and let them go as if you're watching clouds go by in the sky. Feel that experience and notice if there's any changes in your physical sensations. Do you have an urge to scratch something? Notice that. Do you have an urge to move? Notice that. And as things come up, notice it without judgment, and then let it go. And as you're sitting and being, notice that the things that you are noticing are different than what you were noticing when we started. It's as though we live in a stream of thoughts that come by. And there are certain ones that we hold on to for whatever reason. But as you sit, notice that there are things that normally do not enter your awareness. So, and as you keep doing this, if you notice yourself going off on a train of thought, come back to your breath. Come back to noticing how the air moves through hopefully you're breathing through your nose, how it moves through your nose, and how your belly rises and falls, and how your chest rises and falls. And just come back to that. And I'm going to stop here in a minute, but if you wanted to keep going, feel free to do so. And when you're ready to stop, just open your eyes, look around the room. Awesome. Well, hopefully that was a good experience, a good taste of what this is about. And I may do more of this at some point for people. And again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send an email, info@askdrgill.com. And I wish you a great rest of your day.